Hi, welcome to Invest 4K. Canada, being a growing economy, is also a struggling economy, struggling in terms of skilled workers. And Canada has an express entry system which allows skilled workers from various countries to apply for permanent residencies in Canada. To make yourself eligible for the express entry system, you need to score above certain threshold with your profile. Comprehensive ranking system is a method which Canada uses to score for the express entry system. So a lot of people know about the tool on how to calculate their CRS points, but they struggle to understand nitty-gritty of the details. So in today's video, I'm going to explain everything you need to know about the CRS points, and in the follow-up videos, I will also explain, giving you the demo of certain types of people and how to calculate their CRS scores. So please subscribe to the channel if you are in your PR journey, and let's get started. So first of all, I'm putting the link in the description to this detailed CRS criteria page, which is on the canada.ca, so we can go through it together. So please click on it, and now let's go through it. Okay, so as you can see, this is the page for comprehensive ranking system criteria for the express entry system. And to be eligible, there are various points which we will go through today. So as you can see here, there are two ways you can get the maximum points for the various categories. One is if you are coming with your spouse, and the second is if you are not coming with your spouse or you are still single and don't have any common law partner. So the first point here is age, where the maximum points you can gain is 100 points. Don't worry, I'll explain each and everything in detail as well. For the level of education, the maximum points you can gain is 140 if you are coming with spouse, and if you are not coming with spouse or you don't have a spouse, you can get the maximum of 150 points. For the language proficiency, the maximum points you can score is 150 with spouse, and without spouse is 160. For the Canadian work experience, the maximum you can gain is 70 points with spouse, and without spouse you can gain is 80 points. Now, there are some other factors in which the spouse can contribute, and that's why there are less points for the main criterias, but there are more points when a spouse can add their own criterias. The level of education of a spouse can get you a maximum of 10 points. The language proficiency of a spouse can get you a maximum of 20 points. The Canadian work experience of a spouse can get you a maximum of 10 points on top of your core points. So you can get a maximum of 40 points if your spouse is coming with you, but of course you lose 40 points if the spouse is coming with you in the core factors. So ultimately it balances out. So there is no additional benefit of having spouse with you, but there are definitely downsides of a spouse coming with you. Now let's understand the skill transferability factors. If you have a strong official language proficiency and a post-secondary degree, the maximum points you get is 50 points. If you have a Canadian work experience and a post-secondary degree, you get 50 points. So the maximum you can score here is 100 points, which is great number. Of course, helps a lot of people in getting their PR. Now let's understand the foreign work experience for people who have foreign work experience, for people who don't. If you have a good or strong official language proficiency, CLB 7 or above, for those who don't know the CLB level with the IELTS or CELPIP scores, I'm putting the link down in the description so you can go and take a look yourself on how much you need to score to be above 7 in each category. Along with the foreign work experience, you get a 50 maximum points. If you have a Canadian work experience and a foreign work experience, you get 50 additional points as well. And now comes the certification of qualification. So if you have a good or a strong official language proficiency and a certificate of qualification, you get a maximum of 50 points with it. So total, your core capital points, your spouse or common law points, your transferability factors, everything can combine, give you up till 600 points together. And you can also gain some additional 600 points by various other factors. The first one is if you have a brother or sister living in Canada, you get 15 additional points for that. If you have a French language skills, you get 50 additional points. If you have post-secondary education in Canada, you get 30 additional points. If you have an arranged employment in tier 0 and major group of 00, you get 200 additional points. Arranged employment means an employment with LMIA. If you have arranged employment in NOC tier 1, 2 or 3 or any tier 0 other than the major group 00, you get 50 additional points. And the PNP nomination, of course, gives you 600 additional points. So the maximum you can score here is 600 points. And the grand total after all these points is 1200 points. Now if you'll notice this black bar on the top, which basically tells you that if your spouse is not coming with you to Canada, it's as good as you don't have a spouse, and you get the points when you don't have a spouse. So please check that accordingly. Now let's try to break down each section into their points. So I can give you brief explanation about each and every criteria, and can also give you more details about questions which are asked most commonly here on my channel. So the first is the core or the human capital factors. With spouse, you get a maximum of 460 points for all the factors, and without spouse, you can get a maximum of 500 points for all the factors. Let's try to understand here. The Canadian requirement is that they want to give maximum points, or they want to award maximum points to the people who are in their age of between 20 to 29. So they give 100 points if you have a spouse coming with you. They give 110 points if you do not have a spouse or not coming with you to Canada. And after that, it kind of constantly reduces and goes down as you age. So it's always better that if you are in your 20s, you apply for permanent residency, calculate your CRS score, and try to maximize out of it. Now let's go to the next section, which is the level of education. If you have less than secondary or just a high school education, some people do ask me this question, you do not get any points because it's not counted. If you have a secondary diploma or a high school education, you get 28 points if you're coming with your spouse, you get 30 points if you're not coming with your spouse. Now, if you have a 1-year degree, diploma or certificate from a college, university or technical school, then you get 84 points if you're coming with spouse. If you don't have a spouse, you get 90 points. If you have a 2 years of program at a university, college, trade or technical school, you get 91 points if you are coming with spouse, and you get 98 points if you are single or not coming with spouse. Now, the third level of criteria is about the bachelor's degree or a 3 or more year of a program at a university, college or a technical school. You get 112 points if you are coming with spouse, and otherwise 120. Now the next is the main important question which a lot of people are confused about, which is 2 or more certificates, diplomas or degrees, and one must be for a program of 3 or more years, which is basically telling that if you have done anything more than this bachelor's degree or this 3 years of degrees, so if you have done any additional degrees, diplomas or anything after that, whether it's just 1 year, it still counts because one must be of 3 years or more. You get additional points, which is 119 with spouse, and without spouse is 128. That's the maximum points you get for 2 or more degrees, diploma or certificates. In this case, a lot of people who are coming to Canada for studies, they have done their bachelor's or 3+ years of program, which should be best evaluated as well, and need to make sure that they have this criteria has been filled up before. And now if you're coming to Canada, whether it's a diploma, degree or a certificate program you are taking, you are eligible for this criteria. The next one is masters. Of course, people with masters gets more points. So if you have a masters or a professional degree needed to practice in a licensed profession, in this case you get additional points, which is 126 with spouse and 135 without spouse. And of course, PhD is the highest ranking criteria in education, where you get 140 points if you are coming with spouse and 150 if you do not have a spouse or not coming with spouse. So as you increase the level of your education, as you increase the number of degrees you have a higher chances of getting more points in CRS. The next one is the official language proficiency, the first official language, which could be either English or French. So the maximum points you can gain here is 32 with a spouse and 34 without a spouse for each language ability. So let's say if you're not coming with spouse, you can claim 34 points maximum for each reading, writing, speaking and listening category. This is where a lot of people know that they can score the maximum points. They can score as much as 136 points without spouse, and they can increase their chances of getting a PR, because this is the one for which you can practice. This is the one where you can improve your scores. You cannot improve your scores on age, you cannot improve easily your scores on education, but your language proficiency is definitely something where you can improve your scores. So let's try to understand. CLB 10 is the highest level of score, but on an average people do score somewhere around CLB 7 or CLB 8 to gain reasonable enough points. So do calculate accordingly. For the second official language score, let's say if the first official language proficiency exam you have given is English and you are also able to give in French, there you can get additional points for each ability: reading, writing, speaking and listening. You can get a maximum of 24 points without spouse, and you can get a maximum of 22 points with spouse. Saying 6 or more for each CLB 9 is of course difficult for people who are trying to score in French but is not a native French. But people do manage to score between 1 to 3 points for each criteria here. As you can see, it's not worth as much because you don't score a lot of points. It does not drastically change your profile. So I would advise against it unless you are already proficient in French or let's say English if it's your second language. The next is the Canadian work experience. If you are already in Canada through open work permit, through a closed work permit, or a student who have completed their studies and started working in Canada, you know that the maximum years of PGWP, the postgraduate work permit people get, is around 3 years. But let's say you have more than 5 years of work experience in Canada, you can score the maximum of 80 points without spouse and 70 points with spouse. So as we check, the total of human capital or the core factors could be 460 points already with spouse and 500 points already without spouse. But I know most of the people here scores as much as between 350 to 400 points without spouse and somewhere around 350 to 380 points with spouse. So this is not where you can finish all your scores, because most people don't have experience more than 5 years. Most people don't score in both the official languages and do not score as much as 10 CLB points. And most people do not have PhD degrees, as well as most people are not within 20 to 29. The government of Canada knows that you cannot score maximum in each and everything, but that's why we have other points where you can claim or try to claim maximum of it and can increase your chances of getting a PR through express entry. Now before we continue, it takes me more than 50 to 100 hours to make these videos, and I live in Canada, so you know the cost of living, and I would really appreciate if you can subscribe to the channel and help me spread out the word. Let's continue. Spouse or common law factors. The maximum points you can get for a spouse or common law's education is 10 points. As you can see, if they have 2 or more degrees, it increases 1 point. But if they have bachelor's degrees, you get 8 points. Master's or PhD gets 10 points. Anything less, your points reduces as expected. The spouse or common law's official language proficiency, as I said, that it does not increase points much, maximum of 20 points, but it's still worth it. Let's say if your spouse or common law can score between CLB 7 and 8, you can score as much as 12 additional points through that. No harm in giving IELTS or CELPIP language proficiency examination if you are only shy by 10 or 12 points on the last cutoff. Now let's understand the Canadian work experience of a spouse. Let's say if you came here for studies and your spouse came here on spouse open work permit, then here you have a higher chances that they can have as much as 2 years of work experience while being in Canada, and you can get additional 7 points for that. But the maximum you can get for your spouse in terms of work experience in Canada is 10 points. There, as you can see, with the spouse common law factors, if you have a spouse, again comes back to 500 points. So that's why there is less points for the core factors if you have a spouse, because spouse has these additional factors which again balances it out. Now the skill transferability factors. This is where people score a lot of points. Let's say if you have a good language proficiency, CLB 7 or higher. The reason CLB 7 or higher is because I think less than 7, you are in a very tough situation anyways. So CLB 7 or higher with the post-secondary degree, you can increase your chances drastically. That's why people say to score at least CLB 7 in all the language abilities, reading, speaking, writing, and learning, so that you can score these additional points as well if you have education. So let's say if you have a 2 or more degree, diploma or certificate, or a university level of education, which is master's, you get 25 more points above CLB 7, and if you can score above CLB 9 on all 4 of the language test abilities, then you can get a maximum of 50 points. That's why this completely changes the game. This completely increases your score. The same thing with the Canadian work experience as well. If you have a Canadian work experience and a post-secondary degree, that is highly likely that you will get more points. So here, if you have 2 or more degrees, diploma or certificate, or a master's degree, or even a PhD, you get 25 points. And if you have 2 or more years, that increases by 25 more points and makes it 50 points. So that also adds more points. So the more Canadian work experience you have, 1 year, you get 25 additional points. You have 2 years, 25 other additional points. So that increases your points by 50 points. So if you are confused about this section, you can wait for 2 years to get your PR. Foreign work experience. Now for the people who have at least foreign work experience of 1 year, they can get additional 13 points if they are scoring above CLB 7. But let's say if they are scoring above CLB 9 on all 4 first official language abilities, they can score as much as 25 points. If you have more than 3 years of experience, that can go up to as much as 25 points and 50 points if you are scoring above CLB 9. So the foreign work experience also counts. I would say a minimum of 1 year of experience is something you should gain back home if you are coming in Canada for studies. Now let's say the combination of foreign work experience with Canadian work experience, how you can score more points for that. If you have a foreign work experience of 1 year and 1 year of Canadian work experience, you get 13 points. If you have a foreign work experience of 3 years and 1 year of Canadian work experience, you get 25 points. And similarly, that points almost doubles if you have 2 years of Canadian work experience. So as I said, this also increases your chances if you have both Canadian as well as foreign work experience. And the certificate of qualification. The certificate of qualification is only eligible for the trade occupation. For any other occupation, the certificate of qualification, even though you have it, it's not eligible to claim points. It is needed to do your job, but it is not giving you any points. To make sure of that. Points for the certificate of qualification, and if you have a CLB 5 on all the language ability scores, then you get 25 additional points, and if you have more than CLB 7, you get 50 additional points. So total here now is around 600 points you can gain from these additional factors. Now I already discussed about these additional factors which can give you a maximum of 600 points, but not everyone gets it, so you can only claim, I would say, somewhere between 15 to 50 points most of the time, unless you have an arranged employment or a PNP certification from a province. And that sums up the entire criteria of CRS points and the maximum points you can score for each criteria. There is nothing more or less. You don't have to go to an agent, you don't have to pay anyone to understand these criteria. They are very plainly written here. And if you still have any questions about these criteria, please let me know in the comments and I will try my best to help you out here. I'm also going to create a follow-up video on CRS points and explain for each different criteria for a student, for a people who are not in Canada and try to come to Canada, for people who are coming with spouse, for people who are not coming with spouse, and we'll calculate CRS points for each and explain in detail about the common mistakes people do while calculating their CRS points and why it does not match when they create their express entry profile. So please stay subscribed if you want to know as soon as the video is out. So thank you for watching. I hope this is helpful and I will see you in the next video.